Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and it's always a good day when I can introduce a new brand to the channel. So everybody, let me introduce you to Dacia with this, their new flagship, the Bigster. And as you can see, this version is the Pride Edition. Now, before some of you kick off in the comments section, I will just clarify that there is no Pride Edition of the Bigster. What it is essentially is that certain manufacturers will make a Pride car, which is going to be available for Pride month as well as events afterwards, hence I'm filming in August. And I asked Dacia specifically for this car because I did use it for a Pride event, as well as going to be doing a full review on the car. So now that I got that clarified, let me introduce you to the Bigster. So underneath it is based on the very popular Duster. However, it has been given a bit of a stretch, but Dacia have been quite clever by making the Bigster just a 5-seater, so that way you've got plenty of rear passenger space and an enormous boot. You can get this new Bigster as either a mild or full hybrid, front or all-wheel drive, along with a 6-speed manual gearbox or an automatic, depending on which trim levels and engines you go for. And the Bigster is basically, well, it's the brand's flagship, but that's a very unique thing to say for a car that starts, well, just a little bit over £25,000, and you'll see that as my head disappears and I show you the price tag. So I've had this Bigster for a week and I'm going to answer a couple of really big questions. Number one, what's it like? And number two, like other Dacia models in the range, is this just a kind of cheap and cheerful value for money car, or is this something special? Is this something that rivals need to be aware of and perhaps be a little bit worried about? Well, stick with me to find out. Now, when it comes to the Bigster styling, straight away you can see the similarities with its smaller brother, the Duster, because they do share the same platform. It's only when you look at the Bigster in profile that you can see it's been given a bit of a stretch. And I do think as well that the Bigster looks like the result of the Duster and the Jogger making sweet, passionate love. But this is more closely related to the Duster, as I said, because they share the same platform. Now, I've got the extreme trim level here, which means you get this rugged off-roady look to it, and I think it looks very handsome and very purposeful. I love the fact we've got the copper accents here in the front grille, as well as on the wing mirrors. And being a Dacia, of course, we're going to have the Y daytime running lights, which are replicated at the rear of the car, and also on the air vents on the interior, along with those copper accents. So that's another cute little highlight there. With the extreme trim as well, you do get 18-inch alloy wheels. They look very stylish and rugged, and they're pretty easy to clean as well. And then we got one of the kind of cool features on the Bigster, which is first seen on the Duster, and that is in the kind of matte plastic here we've got on the exterior, and it's called Starkle, where essentially that Dacia recycle some plastic and incorporate it into the matte plastic. We got it here on the front, on the wheel arches and on the rear. And essentially what it means is that you've got your kind of matte plastic here, which it kind of looks like it can take a bit of a beating, but it's got these little colour flakes in there as well. So it gives it a kind of unique look to it. And as a result, I think when you put the Bigster together as a package, it doesn't look like a budget vehicle. This wouldn't look out of place, I think, in the manager's car park. It would definitely warrant a second glance with all the other German cars that it's parked next to. But you let me know what you think of the Bigster styling in the comment section below. Do you think it's a handsome looking beast, or do you think there are better looking cars out there, especially for the budget? But on that note, I think it's time that we leave the exterior of the Bigster, get out of the wind, even though it is sunny, and we see what the interior is like. Sat in the front of the Bigster, you are greeted with a very spacious, comfortable and driver-focused interior, but you can see where Dacia are looking to save some pennies when compared to rivals. Now, when it comes to getting in and out of the Bigster, I'm going to say it's pretty easy, because the doors open nice and wide and you have got that raised seated position. However, because we have got the extreme trim and we have got the sunroof fitted, it does mean that we don't have any grab handles. And I'm not just talking about the driver and front passenger, even your rear passengers have to do without. So that's quite surprising and a little bit disappointing. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, what I would say is just have a look at the Bigster, perhaps at a lower trim level where you haven't got that sunroof. But if you are looking at the extreme trim, just make sure you can get in and out comfortably, otherwise you might have to look elsewhere. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are very comfortable. They do hold a big bear like me in place, and because we have again got the extreme trim, and for everyone who has an active lifestyle, they are actually kind of covered in this neoprene, like the same fabric as a wetsuit, so it does mean you can actually wash the seats. So that's actually really cool if you're perhaps going bike riding and going off-road and you return to your Bigster being quite dirty. So that is actually a really nice feature. And also you do get rubber floor mats, and they've got this very unique design, and you can see as well they're made from recycled materials. Again, a really nice feature from Dacia. And I will also say they have got a good level of manual adjustment, and what I love as well is that there is a little handle here which actually adjusts my lumbar support, and that's not something I was expecting in a car in this price bracket. Also, your front passenger does get adjustable lumbar support as well. I will also mention when it comes to the steering, we have got both rake and reach adjustments, so getting the ideal driving position is easy. And then when it comes to interior quality, I am going to say about 95% of it is hard plastics. We've got it on top of the dash here, on top of the doors, the door cards as well. But what I like is that it's not all black plastic. Again, because of the extreme trim level, we have got those copper accents here with the little Y signature to replicate the daytime running lights. I do like that. And then we got these little kind of green accents here as well on the door handles and here on the dash, as well as here on the seats with some contrasting copper stitching. So I do like the fact that Dacia have gone out of their way to kind of liven up the cabin, even though it is predominantly hard, scratchy plastics, but they do feel of a decent quality and they should stand the test of time. We have again got that kind of neoprene fabric here on top of the armrest and also here on the door, so you can kind of rest your arm on it on a long journey. So at least that's something there. So yeah, once you get yourself into the front of the Bigster, it is spacious and comfortable, and I do love the fact that it's kind of driver orientated in its design. But yeah, even if you have got the sunroof, I would like to see some grab handles fitted to the car. But other than that, it's actually a really lovely place to be. Cubby spaces in the Bigster, I'm going to say, are pretty good. Now, we have got some decent sized door pockets where you can get a medium sized bottle of drink in there, but the way it's designed, you can't kind of stick it in there vertically. It will have to lie down, which might be a little bit awkward for some people, especially whilst you're driving. And unsurprisingly, it's not lined with any fabric or rubber, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now here on the center console up front, we have got this tray area up top, but it's not lined with any rubber or fabric, so loose items will make some noise. But just below there, we have got a rubberized tray area, but this is for your wireless charging pad. We've also got a 12-volt socket and two USB-C charging inputs, but I will say with the wireless charging pad, it's a little bit temperamental. You kind of had to put your phone exactly in the right spot to see that little light come on so you know it's charging. So that's just something to be aware of there. Then behind the gear lever, we have got a little space here, which is kind of useful for some loose change, I think, but you can't really put the key in there. But again, not lined with any rubber. We have got two cup holders here, which are of a decent size and depth. We haven't got any plastic grippers, and again, it is lined with hard plastic. But what I do like is that it does get narrow at the bottom, so if you put like a large coffee cup in there, then it will hold that coffee cup in place. The only thing I will say is that the second cup holder is just underneath the armrest, so you can be a little bit awkward again trying to reach for your drink. And then we have got the center armrest, which if I lift up, does unveil a little bit of extra space there. Now, depending on what you specify on the car, this can actually be a cool box, which is quite useful. And it is of a decent size. I can get my arm a little bit down there. I've got some loose items in there as well, but it's also lined with hard, scratchy plastic. Again, something to be aware of there. And then finally, we've got the glove box. And with this being kind of a Renault-based car, or French, does mean, yeah, we've got half the glove box space because we've got the fuse box there. But I will say it's a decent amount of space. Now, again, not lined with any fabric or rubber, but I have found that the little kind of tray area in the lid itself has been more useful. I can kind of tuck little items in there and they are out the way, so that is very cool. So yeah, that's when it comes to the cubby spaces here in the Bigster. There are a decent amount of them, but I would like to see just some little redesigns for them just to make it a bit easier, particularly in the door pockets, so you can put a bottle of drink in there, or perhaps a large bottle of drink, which would be very handy for this type of car. Now, one thing I do like about the Bigster's interior design is that it does feel very driver focused. I do love the fact that this part of the center console is turned towards the driver. The other thing I really like is that there are plenty of physical buttons in here, because the main rival to the Bigster is the MG HS, and that does, in terms of perceived quality, have a more upmarket feel compared to the Bigster. There's more soft touch plastics throughout the cabin. However, like other MG models, we're seeing a lot of the physical controls disappearing, where you have to do it via the main infotainment screen. And I know a lot of people still really don't like that. So if that's something that you're not liking, then definitely have a look at the Bigster. So when it comes to physical controls throughout the cabin, we have got on top of the infotainment screen a couple of buttons to do your volume and the on-off switch. Just below the air vents, we've got a row of buttons to do your dual zone climate control. It's really easy to use when on the move, and there is a reassuring and satisfying click when you action them, and it does feel of a really lovely quality. We have then got a button for your hazard lights and your lock and unlock. With this particular version of the Bigster, we have got a manual gearbox, so that's very old school to see a manual in kind of a large SUV like this. And then on the steering wheel on the left hand side, we have got your cruise control controls, because we've got the manual. If you go for the automatic, you will have radar guided. On the right hand side, we have got your voice and communication controls, as well as the controls to operate the digital dashboard display. Now, because this is a Renault Group vehicle, what we do have just kind of sticking out of the steering column is your media controls, and I do actually like the way this has evolved over the years. Gone is that big slab of plastic. We actually have a couple of buttons to adjust the volume, and if you tap them both, you will mute the track. And then there's a little rotary knob or dial behind it, and that's to kind of do your tuning or change track. And it's so easy to use whilst you're driving. It's just a flick of your finger and it's done. I really do like that. And there are a couple of buttons for your source and your mode, but it's just really easy to use and just so close to the steering wheel. You can do it with, like I said, with a flick of your finger. And then we have got a couple of buttons on the right hand side to turn on and off the stop start system, adjust your headlights in terms of level, your eco button, because we haven't got drive mode on this particular car, and we have got one dedicated button to kind of bring up all your safety systems, and you can turn them on and off, like your lane keep assist or your speed warning. And then just below there, we have got a big switch for your electric handbrake. So yeah, when it comes to physical controls here throughout the cabin of the Bigster, they're really nicely laid out, very ergonomic. I do love the quality of some of the switch gear in here, and I have, like I said, I love the evolution of the little switch there for your media. So yeah, when it comes to the physical buttons and the design of the Bigster's interior, I really am liking it, and you can tell again that the team at Dacia have done their homework. Now, something I want to quickly mention, and it's also a really funky feature here in the Bigster, and we did first see it in the Duster, is the phone holder here on the dash. You're probably thinking that's quite a unique thing and quite old school on a modern day car, particularly as we have got things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But this is something called U-clips, where basically you can put these little kind of phone holders and other little kind of unique features around the car, whether it be in the rear or even in the boot, and they just kind of help you out. And you just kind of unclip it here from the front. You can see you've got a little button there to keep it in place. But not only that, with the phone holder, I can turn it 90 degrees or even more, and even twist the thing round. So you can put it in different areas of the car. Perhaps if you've got kids sat there, and you could put a phone in there and they can watch a movie or listen to some music. So that is actually a really cool thing. And I've also heard as well that you can use a 3D printer to print your own. So I can imagine some of the unique designs that customers might come up with. But that is actually really cool, because you're probably thinking, why would you have a phone holder in a car which has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto? But there are still people out there who do feel that they need to be quite old school, even in a modern day car, and they will have a phone holder on the windscreen. But with this, you don't need it. So that is actually really cool. And then finally we've got the infotainment system and the digital dashboard display, both of which on this extreme trim level are 10.1 inches. Now we'll start with the infotainment screen, which firstly I do love the fact it is turned towards the driver. You have got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and they are wireless as well. And in regards to the main infotainment system, I'm going to say it's absolutely fine. I mean, it's not the most flashy. It is a little bit hesitant when you go through the menus, and there is an element of setup before you set off. But there's not a huge amount of menus to go through, so you can't customize a huge amount in the car. But it is, yeah, it's like a Ron-Seal system. It's very much kind of does what it says on the tin. I do like some of the kind of aesthetics on the screen, particularly like the acid green, because it is something you do see kind of replicated on the digital driver display. And as I mentioned, you've got a couple of physical buttons on top of the screen to do your volume, as well as turning the system on and off. But I will say, yes, there are more superior systems on there on rivals, but then again, you've got to pay a little bit more in order to get that privilege there. But in regards to an infotainment system, I will say it's okay. It does exactly what it's meant to do. And I do think a lot of people are going to spend most of their time with either Apple CarPlay or Android Auto being used. The only other thing I will say is that the screen is very much prone to getting smudges and fingerprints on there. So just be aware to kind of bring a cloth and just give it a clean every once in a while. And then we got the digital dashboard display. Again, it's 10.1 inches. You operate the menu system using the buttons on the right hand side of the steering wheel. But just like the infotainment screen, we have got the same kind of font and display. We have got the acid green that's presented there as well. But it's not the most hugely customizable. It goes through a certain number of pages. You can have things like the sat-nav or the built-in sat-nav on the screen. You can have your digital driver information on the right-hand side, but you can also make it disappear as well. But again, against some of its rivals, like say from Volkswagen Group, yeah, it doesn't really compete. But like I said, with the infotainment system, there's a very Ron-Seal feel to it. It just gives you the information that you want. It's lovely and clear. It's easy to read. Yeah, and you shouldn't have any real issues with it whatsoever. So yeah, being sat here in the front of the Bigster, it's spacious, it's comfortable, it's got a good amount of kit in here as well. Yes, you can see where Dacia are trying to save some pennies, but at the same time, it still has that kind of strong value for money feel about it. And one final thing before we kind of sit in the back, actually it's two things, is I do love the fabric here up top. It feels like a good kind of rough carpet, again kind of adding to that extreme kind of active lifestyle feel. And the other one as well is that we do have a little Easter egg, which is a little, I don't think that's a Bigster, that looks more like a Duster because the boot isn't as large or as long, but you got a little Dacia there on the windscreen as well as on the rear screen as well. So that's a cute little funky feature. But yeah, I do love the fact that Dacia do seem to have done their homework. They do seem to have put their kind of effort in to make this a really nice interior. And also for those who want the extreme, who have that active lifestyle, yeah, the washable seats, the rubber floor mats, I think it works really well. And on that note, I think it's time that we leave the front seats of the Bigster and we see what it's like for rear passengers. Sat in the back of the Bigster, it's actually very spacious and comfortable back here, and I could easily imagine myself doing a long journey and arriving at my destination feeling refreshed and relaxed. Now when it comes to getting in and out of the back of the Bigster, again like the front, it's really easy because the doors open nice and wide. In fact, they are quite close to 90 degrees, and also got that raised seated position. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't have any grab handles for rear passengers because of that sunroof, so if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, then definitely have a go at the dealership. But one thing I will say is that the rear doors are actually surprisingly large, so the opening and aperture is larger than that of some rivals, so it should make it easier to get in and out. And then once you sat here, like I said, you find it's very spacious and comfortable. That driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room. I can easily tuck my feet underneath the driver's seat as well, and that seat is in its lowest position. And headroom is also very good, even with that sunroof. I have had a couple of very tall passengers sat in the car, one of them being a celebrity as I was helping out at Pride. Got to turn around. Got to turn around. and they really did enjoy the rear passenger space. I would say to stick with 2 adults sat in the back of the Bigster because it's not the widest of cars, but it should be absolutely fine for kids, even though there is a bit of a transmission tunnel to navigate over. And again, just like the front, we have got your rubber floor mats in here with that very quirky design on them. Now, speaking of kids, we have got Isofix supports on the outer seats, and there's a little zip just covering the Isofix bar, but it is easy to open and affix a child seat, so that is actually very handy. Then when it comes to cubby spaces, I'm going to say it's okay. I mean, we've got some decent sized door pockets. However, because of the way that they're shaped, you'll probably only be able to get a small bottle of drink in there because they're not the widest, but it is actually very handy. We have got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. And then we've also got, I can't say center armrest, but we have got the center seat, which does fold down, which, yep, we have got a 40-20-40 split in the rear seats. We have got a couple of cup holders here as well, and also these little slits, which are perfect to put your phone in there. So that's actually really handy on a long journey, and something I do like on the Bigster. And again, shows that Dacia are putting some uniqueness and quirkiness into their vehicles. Also, just like the front, we have got a little U-clip here, so I can put my little phone holder in place, which is very handy. And when it comes to features, we also have a couple of USB-C charging inputs, as well as a couple of vents just above them, so that's actually really nice. And in terms of features, that's kind of about it. We can't do anything with the seat bench or recline the seats, but for this price, the fact that we got a 40-20-40 split, I think more than makes up for it. The windows are absolutely massive. They are tinted on this extreme trim. They open about 80% of the way down, but there is a little ledge here, so I can just about rest my arm on there on a longer journey. But as you can see, it is a little bit higher than some rivals. But what I do like as well is that we have got a window in the C-pillar, so it does allow a lot of extra light in, along with that sunroof, which actually kind of extends about 2/3 the length of the roof. So yeah, being sat here in the back of the Bigster is very spacious and comfortable. I do like some of the features back here, again, like with the U-clip, but yeah, this will be perfect for kids or adults on a long journey. And on that note, I think it's time that we leave the rear seats and see what all the fuss is about regarding the boot. Now, when it comes to the boot capacity of the Bigster, it does vary depending on which version you go for. But here's the thing, at no point does it drop below 600 litres of space. So whichever version of the Bigster you go for, the boot capacity is going to be gargantuan. Now, I have got the 1.2 litre mild hybrid front wheel drive, which means I do have the largest boot capacity. So when I get this boot open, you will be greeted with 677 litres of space, which is just, well, mind-boggling for this segment of car, but also for the price tag. And again, you've got to take your hats off to the team at Dacia for creating such a spacious package for so little money, especially when compared to rivals, not just in this segment, but in the segment above. Now, if you go for the mild hybrid but all-wheel drive, the boot capacity does drop to 629 litres, and if you go for the full hybrid version of the Bigster, it drops again to a still very respectable 612 litres. Even then, it beats a majority of the cars in its segment and even in the segment above. Now, when you get the boot open, of course, you are going to be greeted with a nice wide square load area. You can easily get a large suitcase in there, plus a few carry-ons or maybe even weekend bags, and it will easily swallow up a week's shopping. What I like as well is that there is no boot lip to navigate over, but I would say the boot level is a little bit higher than what I'd be liking, but it should be absolutely fine for dogs to jump in and out of, or if you are loading any large bulky items such as a wheelchair or mobility scooter. Now, I'm just going to put this tonneau cover back just so we can see the rest of the boot area. And when it comes to features, yeah, there are plenty of them. So the first one I mentioned earlier is that we got a 40-20-40 split in the rear seats, which is really handy. To get the seats down, you have got a couple of levers to just give a quick pull. We have got some tethering hooks and a 12-volt socket. We got some shopping hooks as well. We've also got a variable boot floor, but even in its highest level, yep, you can lift that up and put some items underneath. I've not tried yet, but I do think you can get the tonneau cover stored underneath the boot floor, so that's actually a very handy feature. But what I like as well is with this variable boot floor, it is in two sections, so you can create a bit of a divide there, so that is really handy. We've also got here another U-clip, but this one is kind of like a little cup holder or a little storage bin with an LED light that you can affix, so that is actually really cool. But we've also got another U-clip up here. Now that would be brilliant for this little LED light if perhaps you're going camping and you've got the boot open, because that is actually a very decent light source there. And then there's another feature on this particular car which a lot of you are gonna love. Now it is an optional extra, but underneath the second boot floor we've got a spare tyre. I can't believe I'm saying this, but if I just move this back and you just lift them up, you are greeted with a space saver spare wheel with actually a bit of extra space. There's even a big tray area down here as well, which is very useful. And then if you do want to put the rear seats down, as I said, you have got a couple of little levers here. Now you don't have a completely flat load area, there is a little bit of an incline, but you know what? I think we can forgive Dacia for that, because this is a massive load capacity for this type of car, and it does turn it into a bit of a minivan, or if you wanted to, you could probably shove an air mattress in there and sleep in it overnight as well. So yes, this is the selling point of the Bigster, and so much of a selling point, I've shown this to nearly half a dozen people this week, and 2 of them have already said they're going to go and buy one as a result, because this is just a stupid amount of boot capacity for such little money. So on that note, I think it's time I get the rear seats up, we get the boot down, and we take this Dacia Bigster out on the road and see if it still continues to be a brilliant car when it's moving. So once you start driving the Bigster, first impressions are actually really positive. It is a very easy and surprisingly comfortable car to drive, and it also feels very old school, and by that I mean I'm driving a mid-sized SUV and I'm changing gear because I got a 6-speed manual, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the review. Now when it comes to visibility, I'm gonna say it's actually really good. Now even though this is a mid-sized SUV, you do sit surprisingly high, so as a result I got a wonderful commanding view of the road ahead. Now I will mention I've got quite a long bonnet in front of me. I do like the fact that it is shaped and grooved as well, but you can't quite judge where the front of the car is. But all trim levels do come with at least front and rear parking sensors and front and rear cameras. So when it comes to backing the Bigster into a parking space, it's really easy, because even though this is a long car, because it is based on the Duster, it's not particularly wide, so it's surprisingly easy to park. So that's something I really do love about it. Now when it comes to the A-pillars, they are quite thick and chunky, and on a couple of occasions I have found myself looking around them at a roundabout or a junction, so that's just something to be aware of there. The wing mirrors are of a lovely shape and size. I have got blind spot monitoring as well, and then when I look over my shoulder I do find that the C-pillar actually has quite a large window in it, so as a result it does kind of give this impression that there's a good amount of visibility there, even though it kind of slopes upwards rather than downwards. So there is a tiny bit of a blind spot, but I have got that blind spot monitoring. And then finally, rear visibility I will say is actually pretty good. It's a decent sized rear screen, however it is quite high up, so again when it comes to reversing, yeah, you can't quite judge what's going to low down behind you, but like I said, you've got the reversing sensors and camera there to help you out. But what I also like is that none of the headrests in the back are obstructing my rear visibility either. So yeah, it's just all round really good in the Bigster, and like I said, it's surprisingly comfortable and easy to drive. Not bad for a big SUV that costs under 30 grand. Now, when it comes to trim levels in the Bigster range, you've got 3 to choose from. You got the entry-level Expression, the mid-spec Journey, and then this top-of-the-range Extreme. Now, I will be honest, because of the price point of the Bigster, regardless of which trim level you go for, you're still going to get an awful lot of metal for your money. But I would say have a look at the Journey first. That seems to be the kind of sweet spot in the range, and then work your way upwards to the Extreme. Now, personally, I would go for the Extreme. I just love the aesthetics on this car. I love the copper accents on the exterior and interior, along with the green. And yeah, I just love the overall look of the car. The other thing that's great as well is that regardless of which trim level you go for, you've got the access to all engines. So that is another highlight there. I will also say as well, when it comes to the kind of standard equipment on the trim levels, it is quite unique. So on this Extreme, you get things like the sunroof, but you saw earlier I had a manual tailgate. But on the mid-spec Journey, you don't get a sunroof, but you get a powered tailgate. It is quite unique in the way it's been kind of set up. Also, as well, as when it comes down to wheel sizes. Now, if you go for the Expression, you get 17-inch alloys. You go for the mid-spec Journey, they bump up to 19s. And then with the Extreme, they actually get a bit smaller. They drop to 18s. So that, again, is quite unique as well. But I got a feeling that people who are going to go for the Extreme, they're going to be looking to take their Bigster off-road, or at least kind of on perhaps a bit of mud or gravel, and just take full advantage of that ground clearance and ride height. But yeah, when it comes to the trim levels in the Bigster range, I'll be honest, regardless of which trim level you go for, you'll get an awful lot of car for your money. But in terms of standard equipment, I do think the Journey is the one to look at first. Now, when it comes to powering the Bigster, there are 2 engine choices available to you, but 3 power outputs. Now, you have got the choice of 2 mild hybrids and a full hybrid, and depending on which versions you go for, you've got the choice of either a 6-speed manual or an automatic, front or all-wheel drive. So I will put everything on screen in a moment for you, but essentially, if you go for the mild hybrids, you can only get the 6-speed manual only, but you do have the choice of front or all-wheel drive. If you go for the full hybrid, it's front-wheel drive only, and that's the one that comes with an automatic gearbox. So I'm going to put everything on screen now for you so you can compare the performance. And again, just like the trim levels, it is quite unique, because if you go for the mild hybrid, you do have a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine, which if you go for the 2-wheel drive, you actually have 138 brake horsepower, but for the all-wheel drive it does drop a bit to 128. Now, when it comes to torque, it's exactly the same at 230 Newton meters, and 0 to 62 time is 11.2 seconds for the all-wheel drive, but that does drop to 9.8 for the 2-wheel drive, which is what I've got here on test. And then when it comes to economy, it does say with the 4x4 I should get an average of around 46 miles per gallon, but with this 2-wheel drive that I'm testing now, it should be a little bit better at around 51.4 miles per gallon. Now, I will be honest and say I'm averaging around 46. I've actually got about 45.5 mpg right now. But if you do go for the full hybrid version of the Bigster, that engine does increase to a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder, but it doesn't have a turbo. Power-wise, you have 153 brake horsepower, but torque does drop a little bit to 172 Newton meters. And then 0 to 62 is a little bit quicker, and I mean by 1/10 of a second, than the front-wheel drive manual of 9.7 seconds. And when it comes to MPG, well, there is a claim here from Dacia that you should get over 60 miles per gallon. Now, that would be really impressive. I will also mention, when it comes to towing, if you go for the mild hybrids, you can do 1,500 kilos, but with the full hybrid, it does drop to a ton. So that's just something to be aware of there. But with this, 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged engine with 138 brake horsepower, because I got the front wheel drive. I will be honest and say it suits the car really well, but what I will say also is, because in terms of outright power compared to some of its rivals that will definitely be more powerful, if you drive regularly with perhaps yourself, your partner and some luggage in the car, it'll be absolutely fine. But if you're regularly gonna have adults, kids, luggage in the back, you might want to look at the full hybrid and just take advantage of that extra boost in power. But like I said, it will be front wheel drive and automatic only. Going through the gears, it's actually been an absolute joy. And again, like I said, having a mid-sized SUV with a 6-speed manual does feel pretty old school. Now the manual gearbox itself, I'm going to say, is pretty decent. Now, it's not like a Honda Civic Type R where you got that kind of bolt action feel. There is a bit of notchiness when I put it into the gear, but it is a positive notch. I do know I've got it into gear, so that's something I do appreciate. And even around town, it's been an absolute doddle, and the clutch has been light enough that kind of constantly changing gear hasn't been a strain or an ache on my left foot, so I've definitely appreciated that. And then when it comes to acceleration, it's been absolutely fine. I mean, you could kind of feel the turbo kick in, and I'm doing 40 miles per hour now. I'm about to go to the national speed limit, so drop a cog, put my foot down, feel the turbo there. Got that 3-cylinder thrum. I'm now at 60, straight into 6th gear, and I can relax. So yeah, I've got no issues with this 1.2 litre 3-cylinder with the 6-speed manual. It does work with the car very well, but like I said, it does feel quite old school. But do you know what? I do actually kind of like that. And in regards to MPG, I'm currently getting about 45.5 up to 46. So yes, I'm a little bit off that 51.4. But that's still not too bad for a car of this size with such a small capacity engine up front. Now, something I have been impressed with whilst living with the Bigster has been brake pedal strength and feel, because that's definitely something you want to feel confident in using. And what I like is that it's not too sharp when you tap on the brakes. There's no kind of really jerky bite. It has got a really nice progressive feel to it, so you will have that confidence to know that when you do press on the brake pedal, yeah, you're definitely going to stop. Now, when it comes to safety with the Bigster, I will say that it is a 3-star Euro NCAP rated car. So yes, it is below a lot of its rivals that will usually kind of get a top 5-star score. But I would say probably the Bigster is still going to be a safe car to drive, because what they were kind of criticizing was the lack of certain safety systems that you do get on more expensive rivals. But I wouldn't be surprised that the actual kind of body shell and everything of the Bigster is going to be very secure and rigid there. But that's just something to be aware of, that on the Euro NCAP safety test, it has gotten 3 stars. So what about the Bigster's ride and refinement? Well, I'm driving through the local village where I do my ride testing, and I will say I am genuinely surprised by it. And by that I mean how good it is. Now, because I've got the extreme trim, it does mean I've got the 18-inch alloy wheels. If you go for the journey, they are an inch bigger at 19s. But even here with these 18s, they're doing a really good job of dealing with a lot of the bumps and imperfections coming through into the cabin. Now, yes, you go over a big pothole or manhole cover, you will get a boom and a jolt, but for the most part, this is doing a really good job. The only thing I would say is it kind of feels a bit old school in the way you're kind of going over these bumps. There are rivals out there that feel a bit more grown up and sophisticated in the way it deals with the imperfections, but for everyday driving, you'll have no issues whatsoever. And this definitely feels like you'll have no issues on a day-to-day basis going to work and back. So that is definitely a positive there. And also with the Bigster, you can tell it's been set up to be a comfortable drive. It's meant to be a big, comfortable family SUV. But like I said, it deals with those bumps and imperfections in a surprisingly good way. I am genuinely impressed by how well it does that. And then we move on to the refinement. So I'm doing 30 miles an hour on a nice smooth bit of tarmac, and it's really lovely. I'm going to just accelerate to 40. You get a bit of engine noise when you put your foot down, but you got that nice 3-cylinder thrum. I got no tyre roar, no wind noise. It is actually quite windy out. And now I'm going to accelerate to 60. Engine noise again, but that's 60. Cruise control on. That is very impressive. The main intrusion into the cabin is wind noise, and it's coming off the A-pillar, but the only thing I would say is it's actually very windy today. But other than that, I've got no engine noise coming into the cabin. I got a little bit of tyre roar. If I go over a kind of rough bit of tarmac, yes, it comes through into the cabin. These seats do an amazing job of dealing with a lot of those vibrations as well from the outside that you would get from this type of car. But yeah, I am really impressed by how the Bigster rides, and its refinement as well. Another thing which is very decent if you go for the Journey or the extreme trim levels is that you do get an uprated sound system, and it is actually pretty decent. Just don't go nuts with the bass, otherwise yes, you'll get a lot of distortion coming through. But for a long journey, again, just like the ride and refinement, I've had no issues whatsoever. This is actually a pretty good motorway cruiser. And I will just give you an update. I am getting just shy of 49 miles per gallon. So yeah, that mild hybridness is definitely working its magic today. So what about the Bigster's handling? Well, as I just mentioned in regards to ride, it is set up to be a very nice, comfortable family SUV. So you do know that when you do chuck it into the corners, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of roll and lean there. Now, I will mention straight away, I do love the size and thickness of the steering wheel. I have a feeling it is leatherette, not real leather that's wrapped around it, but it does feel of a really good quality. I'll also mention as well that we don't get any drive modes with the Bigster. You just get an eco button, so it kind of takes a little bit of that power away, which is, yeah, kind of what you would expect on this type of car. But when you chuck it into the corners, what I like is, yes, if you push it, there is a bit of roll and lean there, but for the most part, it feels surprisingly composed. I am genuinely surprised by that. Also, with this being front wheel drive, yeah, you can actually feel what the front wheels are doing. I do feel connected to the car. There's a little bit of weight in the steering, but in terms of that kind of full connection that you would get from something like, say, a Tekka, yeah, you're not going to get that. But with that little bit of weight there, I do know what the front wheels are doing. Yes, granted, in terms of feedback, they don't quite give you that kind of unique response there, but I don't feel detached from the car. I don't feel like I'm driving around in a video game, which is a positive. And it also means as well, but even though there's a little bit of weight in there, it is light enough to make parking the Bigster a doddle. So yes, when it comes to the ride refinement and the way the Bigster handles, it has been really well set up. This is a genuinely surprisingly good family SUV when it comes to ride comfort. Refinement is the big one, I will be honest. Like I said, I wasn't expecting it to be that quiet, but yeah, when you put them all together, it does make for a very compelling family SUV. This doesn't feel anywhere near as cheap and cheerful as I thought I was going to be expecting with it. So with my time in the Bigster, what have been some of the highlights and some of the little niggles I need to let you guys know about? Well, highlights have been the practicality, definitely, with the car. Everyone I've shown the Bigster and they've looked in the boot and seen the rear passenger space, they've been absolutely gobsmacked by it. And then when you tell them the price point of the car, they're even more impressed. That's been the real standout feature to the Bigster whilst reviewing it this week. I do actually like the looks of it as well. I think it's proportioned really nicely. And then you've got things like the sunroof, which I believe this kind of large sunroof is a first for Dacia. And I've had rear passengers in the car and they've been really loving the extra light coming into their cabin. So yeah, that's definitely something a lot of people will appreciate. I do love the standard levels of equipment. I do love the fact that it is all kind of driver focused and the infotainment system is quite no nonsense. But on the flip side, when it comes to niggles, the first one is a common one, which is all the safety bongs you get. So when you get a mile an hour over the speed limit or you stray across the white lines on the road, you do get a warning coming through into the cabin. I will say as well, the kind of noise it makes with the parking sensors when you get close to an obstacle is quite unique. It sounds like kind of a sonar based system. So that's, yeah, definitely a new one for me. And then when it comes to other niggles, I will say they've all been kind of software based. So for example, you do get wireless CarPlay, but on a number of occasions I've had to kind of plug my phone in and tether it up to make sure it kind of reconnects. So that's something I have noticed. I use a Faraday box to put my key in, so I don't want anyone kind of doing any radar relays in order to try and get into the car. And on a couple of occasions I've kind of kept it in there so it has blocked the signal from the key to the car. So when I've kind of walked up to it in the morning, it's like the car's kind of been scratching its head and going, sorry, I don't recognize you. So I have to press the button on the key. And then apart from that, that's it. When it comes to niggles, they're very few and far between. The pluses on the Bigster so outweigh the negatives. And on that note, I think it's time we go straight to the conclusion, because this has been a massively impressive car. So what are my thoughts on the new Dacia Bigster? Well, at the beginning of this review, I asked two big questions. Number one, what is the Bigster like? And number two, is this just another cheap and cheerful value for money car from Dacia, or is this something special which could worry some of its rivals? Well, firstly, the car itself. I am massively impressed by it. It is a huge amount of metal for your money. To get all this for under £30,000 is impressive. That boot is just worth the price tag alone, especially when compared to rivals that are at the same price point, essentially cars from the segment below. And then you've got things like the looks. I do really like it. I think it's very well proportioned. I do love the little kind of copper accents on the exterior and interior. And yeah, it's great to see kind of Dacia trying to push the boundaries of their cars, having a more powerful full hybrid available, for example, having a massive roof now introduced onto their cars. The value for money, and also the fact that the car drives surprisingly well, will definitely be another hit with buyers. And this is a car that's going to have so much appeal. I can see dog owners who've got 3 or 4 dogs loving this, taking full advantage of that boot capacity. I can see families, young families that have really active lifestyles, taking advantage of that boot, taking advantage of the ruggedness of the exterior, perhaps even going for the all-wheel drive version. And I hate to say it, but I could see certain customers going to Dacia because they're after something a little bit more from a certain brand, and that brand to me kind of stands out, is Subaru, because there are lots of people that love to go for Subaru cars because they have the dependability, the ruggedness, and they can go off-road. But Dacias are dependable. They've done very well in reliability surveys, so that's going to be a positive. This car will come as well with a 7-year warranty. It's like Toyota's warranty for 10 years, but it's 7 and 75,000 miles. But you just take it to a Dacia dealer, you just do your service every year, and they just add an extra year to it for 7 years. That's confidence in your dependability. You don't see that from many other brands apart from the aforementioned Toyota and also Lexus. So yeah, there is a huge amount of appeal to this car, and there is, I think, reason why certain manufacturers should be a little bit worried. Yes, Subaru, as I just mentioned, and also earlier when I mentioned MG with the HS, their flagship. Now granted, with their car, their kind of perceived quality for the interior does feel a little bit more upmarket, but I'll just turn this corner here. When it comes to actual quality, they're not doing as well as Dacia. I do believe in a recent, I think it's a What Car or JD Power survey, Dacia came 6th for dependability out of about 39 manufacturers. MG came last. So that says a lot as well. So yeah, I do think a couple of manufacturers out there should be worried about the Bigster. And I'm going to say something else as well. I genuinely like this car. I could actually see myself driving one of these on a regular basis and having my own Bigster. Not sure if I go for the manual. I'm kind of getting at an age now where I'm loving an automatic and kind of retiring my left foot. But Dacia have made something special. It isn't just cheap and cheerful. It's not just value for money and a huge block of metal. It has quirkiness, it has uniqueness, it drives well, it rides well. It's surprisingly frugal. I'm getting nearly 49 mpg. It's actually climbing. I've been averaging around 45, 46, but because I've got it in eco mode, it's been kind of, yeah, stopping me from putting that power down. So yes, the Dacia Bigster, Dacia's flagship car. Can't believe I'm saying this. Their flagship car that starts at under £30,000. Yeah, I think is arguably one of the stars of the year, without any hesitation. Oh, I'm just going to avoid the geese. Oh no, they're ducks. There we go. Yeah, if you are on the lookout for a brand new SUV and you want a bit of ruggedness to it, you don't really mind about having a, you know, what manufacturer is on the badge, on the bonnet, this has to be on the list. In fact, sod it, if you're looking at a new SUV, just whack the Bigster on your list. Do it. Take some time, go for a drive. I think you will be impressed by it. Whether or not you go for it will be a different answer, but I think they've made a winner. I think they really truly have. The Duster has always been something special, but this is just one, maybe 2 notches above that. So yeah, the Dacia Bigster, it is value for money, but by damn is it worth it. It really is. So everyone, I hope you have enjoyed my review of the Dacia Bigster. I want to say a massive thank you to Dacia UK for loaning me the Bigster, having them on the channel for the first time, but also for loaning me this specific Bigster, the one with that Pride livery on the side, because I have used it at a recent and local Pride event, and I did have to move some celebrities from the hotel to the venue and back again, and that was a really wonderful experience. Go to my Instagram to check that out. I do also want to just mention to like, subscribe, hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, make a new video. If you've got any questions about the Bigster and my time with it, please put them down in the comment section below and I will do my utmost to answer them. If you would like me to perhaps look at the automatic version of the Bigster, do let me know and I can see what Dacia say. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this, and if you have been inspired to go look at a Bigster and even put pen to paper, do let me know as well. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video and I will catch you all in the next one. So take care everybody, and bye bye.